Are we sick of the Dallas Cowboys coaching decision drama yet? Are we? It's been one day. Are we sick of it yet? It's been one half of one day, and it's dominated the news cycle for the better part of 48 hours. In case you've been under a rock, not that anyone really cares that much about the coaching job in Dallas, Mike McCarthy is done, and it sounds like he didn't like the terms, and he might have a better gig. That's the way it sounds to me. So, Cowboys face painters, stop whining that it's a good job, that, it should be pretty embarrassing if, in fact, at the end of the day, this lame statement that's been made by everybody involved that the two parties have agreed to part ways. That never happens. Either you get fired or you don't want the job. And I'm guessing at this point, oddly enough, Mike McCarthy might, oddly enough, at this time in his career, have enough leverage to say, you know what, old man, I don't like the deal at all. I'm out. It's a bad roster. And Jerry Jones baggage. That's pretty tough to overcome for anybody, especially somebody named Mike McCarthy. Last night, you had a wild card playoff game, a beatdown by the Rams over the Vikings, which brings up all sorts of storylines by itself. But during the postgame show on ESPN, Troy Aikman said the quiet part out loud last night.
Land in your lap, right? When we were in Dallas this year for a couple of games, look, the topic has always been out there about Jerry and Mike and what might happen, and now they've chosen to go in their separate ways. I don't think Mike will be out of a job for too long, but this job's as coveted as any because you're going to run the Dallas Cowboys. In what direction do you think they ought to look?
Well, I thought Mike McCarthy would be the head coach, so this is a bit of a surprise for me today that he's not going to be. And what went into those conversations that Schefter talked about, I'm not exactly sure, but it suggests that there's not a real plan. I mean, and the fact that they haven't had the opportunity to maybe interview a Ben Johnson and some of these others, Aaron Glenn. I think that what Schefter said as far as Kellen Moore being a candidate, that seems logical to me. A guy who has familiarity with the building. He's worked obviously with the Cowboys and with Jerry Jones, and they know each other very well. In fact, when Mike McCarthy got the job, it was told to Mike that Kellen Moore would be the offensive coordinator. So that's how much the Jones family thinks of him. Beyond that, it's hard to imagine. As far as a coveted job, I don't know that that's accurate. I mean, really? I do think the Cowboys are obviously a high-profile team. Whoever is covering or whoever is head coach of that team is certainly going to draw a lot of attention. But I think most football people that take over head coach, they want to do it on their terms.
That's fair.
That's hard to do. And it's, if you take a Dan Campbell, for instance, is Dan Campbell if he's with the Dallas Cowboys? It's hard to imagine that he is. It's hard to imagine that a lot of these coaches might be. So I love the Dallas Cowboys. I played there for 12 years. I wish them well. But to say that it's a coveted job, I'm not sure I would necessarily agree with that.
Thank you for that. Well, you would think that would sting the old man who's drooling on himself, who owns the Cowboys, that a legendary player, a Hall of Fame player, I've said it for over a year and a half now. It's really not that good of a job. I mean, there's, as I just pointed out, there is baggage and there is not a very good roster and there's no way to maneuver. It's a meh roster at best. That's because 3-star players, but they get hurt and then the whole bottom falls out. And the barrier to success in Dallas is a front office. Debating Mike McCarthy's decision-making, play-calling, in-game decisions is pretty much irrelevant and has been for a while now because their roster isn't good enough. And I'm guessing mumbling Mike said, not that it could make any sense. I don't know. You might need an interpreter when those two talk to each other. But he probably said something to the effect, look, old man, I need better players. I needed to be able to find some better players. And your last pick was the washed-up Ezekiel Elliott. So if I can't have that, no thanks. And I'm guessing the old man that runs the team, it took him a while to say this, and it was probably nonsensical, but he probably said, the old man says, that's not going to happen, fathead. I don't think he calls him fathead, but I am. You play with what I give you. And the Mumbly Mike said, peace out. That's the way it sounds to me, which makes perfect sense. There's no way Jerry Jones is going to change at the age of 107. Not going to happen. There's no way he's going to say to this coach, Mike McCarthy, the next coach, I don't care, fill in the blank. There's no way he's going to say at this point, you know what? You do that personnel thing. You run that team. I'll give you another VP. You guys pick the players. I kind of screwed up the last one. I guess Ezekiel Elliott didn't quite pan out. So I just need my hourly media updates and my lame radio shows, and I'll be fine. So you guys do the rest. There's no chance he'll say that. None. You got to take the keys from him, and that's not going to happen. Front smart office wins. The way a franchise wins in the NFL, number one, is smart front office. That's not a bunch of people. That's usually one or two. Then it's the head coach, then it's the quarterback, or then it's the quarterback, then the head coach. But you don't do anything without the business being run well. And I'm talking about the business of good players, not the business of selling a lot of Coors Light. So they don't have that. The Texans, for example, just compare and contrast at this point the two franchises. The Texans in the offseason. This is the Texans who are now in round 2 of the playoffs, and they're in round 2 of the playoffs because of deals they made during the offseason. They go and get Joe Mixon. People really hadn't heard much of Joe Mixon outside of fantasy nerds. People didn't know much. Next thing you know, he's a rock star. They get 2 talented receivers, and they're now playing the Chiefs in the second round of the playoffs. That's the difference. Constantly being proactive in the right ways. So now what? Our face is going to hurt if this keeps going, but there is at least some sex appeal and energy to this. I'm going to guess they pick some play caller. Then they're going to spin it, and a lot of fans are going to spin it like the greatest hire ever, and it's going to be basically Chan Gailey 2.0 or Jason Garrett 2.0 or whatever nondescript assistant coach 2.0. It'll be that because that's comfortable, and those guys want the job and need the job, and Mumbling Mike may not have needed it anymore. Jimmy Johnson, of all people, I guess this was on Sunday. He had this hot take, which was kind of weird.
I've got no inside information, but, things are stale in Pittsburgh. Things are stale in Dallas. And just food for thought. How about a coaching swap? Mike McCarthy's a Pittsburgh guy. Let him go to Pittsburgh. Let Mike Tomlin go to Dallas. Both franchises would be excited.
Okay, that's nice. Mike McCarthy might like that, except there's pretty awful quarterback play in Pittsburgh. But Mike Tomlin, who would be a great hire in Dallas, he's very much organized and detailed exactly what the chaotic organization needs. But there's no way that a guy like Mike Tomlin, working for an organization in a front office like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who's been there, 15 years or so, has been left alone for 15 years. There's no way that guy could end up with a carnival barker in Dallas. No chance. He'd rip his hair out by day 2. He'd go nuts. So let's not do the drill yet. What's likely, what's not likely, blah, 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 blah. Let's just go to the part that's going to break the internet. Let's just fast track past all the assistant coaches 2.0 and just go straight to the part that breaks the internet, and that's Deion Sanders. That's the only thing that matters right now. It's the only thing that's any energy. The rest of it is just blah. Would the old man make the move? Yeah, said Deion Sanders, and yes, it's being reported they talk, and of course they're going to talk. Yes, I could see it. I see a lot of it. In fact, I'm going to predict the old man will drag this out and enjoy every single minute of Deion Sanders headlines. I don't think it happens in the end, but I think he drags it out as much as he can. And Deion Sanders, who's not a fool publicly, will play along just fine. So here is a checklist, if I could provide such a thing, a checklist, that's what I said. A checklist of why Jerry Jones would make a run at him and offer him the job. And then probably the more likely the reasons why he would not. Don't confuse the two of them talking, because Let me say this about Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is Donald Trump. They're both old white male versions of the Kardashians. They get anxiety if they're not talked about all the time. They get anxiety no matter what form it takes that they're not in the news cycle. That's how they get anxiety. They're old white male versions of the Kardashians. So this couldn't be served up any better for the old wrinkled up white Kardashian that runs the Dallas Cowboys. Deion Sanders is the lightning rod of all football conversations. So he's going to love every second of this. So why would he? And there's there is something to it. There is. I get it. Why would he go there? Number one is it's not just a splash. It's a huge splash. I can't even look up at the giant ESPN screen in front of my face and not see Deion Sanders and Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones and Deion Sanders talk again today, it says. It's scrolling every minute. So it's a splash. The boring guy just left, and Jerry Jones would love to do the opposite. Remember, he's Trump, he's a Kardashian. So he loves that the conversation is happening.
Hey Austin, Jeff Ward here, and I never thought I'd be in an accident and need a personal injury attorney. And then sure enough, less than a mile from my house, I was blindsided. I was injured. My world was turned completely upside down. I called DJC Law and their team took care of everything. I got the best result possible. Don't just take my word for it. They have over 1,000 five-star reviews. So if you're injured, call 512-888-9999 and get your justice at teamjustice.com.